It's time in our order of service to throw open for discussion. And as we have a few minutes, it's perfectly acceptable. And I'll just referee, play traffic cop. Anything that discussion kicked up for you, made you think about, made you question. So, ball's in your court now.
Intelligence, IQ, is an interesting notion. I've had a lot to do with it over the years, and I don't really find it very useful as a concept. And I think we're probably doing Carter a disservice by measuring her against the test that we've devised. Carter would be a test of intelligence that would probably involve
which we'd fail spectacularly.
The perception of distance and judgment and weight and whether a branch can contain it, I think, would be vast superior to mine, at least.
Agreed. Mine too.
So I would question whether, in fact, she is your average 5-year-old child.
That's, of course, an estimate that it's one of those factoids that you come across, that the average orangutan is more or less the intellectual equivalent of a 5-year-old human.
I'm surprised because a 5-year-old can be pretty smart.
Yeah.
I don't think it's insulting, Arthur, to say that. I think there are some pretty clever 5-year-olds.
Well, I know one who was. She's up there at the moment. Yes. And of course, the Heisenberg principle, as John points out, really applies here, that the thing is changed by our observing it, because we're bringing all of our complete ensemble of awareness to understanding this thing. But our point of view on it is not the whole story. It probably has a point of view about us, too.
I think there was an interesting set of experiments that were done with, I think it was squirrels, not exactly sure, probably squirrels or chipmunks, in which machines were put out into the bush, basically requiring a certain amount of nous to figure out how to get at the nuts. When certain squirrels figured it out, they would teach others who would then work it out. And there was an interesting thought is that you could hypothetically put in place, because the thing is that our species evolved because there was evolutionary pressure for us to evolve in the way that we did. And it would be interesting to see if there would be any way of, in a sense, spurring on the next sentience, as far as the next species that would be able to develop technology and all the rest of things much like we can, just by affecting the kind of evolutionary pressures out there.
You'll note that I avoided any reference to Planet of the Apes in this. I could have gone there, didn't. But yeah, I mean, I think evolution's a fascinating concept, because the notion that we're the final chapter is crazy. if it's happening, it's still happening.
Well, in fact, there was an interesting thought that was brought out, and it talked about the various stages of evolution. So things like the evolution of replicating molecules, the genetic code, sex, and all the way up there. And that one of the particular key ones that we seem to have is something like grammar. What you're saying, that may well be evolved prior to our species, very late to demonstrate some ability to become that.
Certainly Washoe, the chimp, in those studies on the chimpanzees, learning sign language and then using the sign language to make puns within sign language. They've also been taught in Japanese studies to communicate with a series of sound sort of phoneme units it's a very limited repertoire, but if you could, basically to use any sort of symbol, be it a sign, a word, a sound, or a squiggle on a piece of paper, is to be able to think abstractly. That is to say, removed from reality, removed from physical stimuli. And if you can think abstractly, and you have the capability of self-reflection, how are you different from us exactly, except in the degree of its development?
That's right. It's a case of gradualism rather than a specific point. But interesting, just on that sort of same thing, is that one of the points I brought up is that, in fact, we very much might not be the final stage. In fact, if you have a look at the way that it's all been done, it all has to do with information. One of the key developments of evolution that we've faced is the fact that we have something like grammar, which allows amazing repertoire of words and of concepts to communicate with each other in an incredibly sophisticated way. But that's now taking a step back to other forms of information, things like digital technology. There's very much the thought that the thing that could place us in terms of the top of the evolutionary chain might not even be life.
Yeah.
More to the point, might not be biological life.
You wouldn't be the first person to suggest that if what we deem to be intelligence has to do with the complexity of information and the ability to manipulate it in ever more complex ways, then certainly, my handheld phone is smarter than I am. As long as it doesn't become conscious, I'm very happy of it. But at the same time, you'd have to imagine a computer that would know when it's inappropriate to turn itself on. That's reason. Reason, as Aristotle understood it, is that facility of mind that knows when not to use itself.
I do suspect, though, that very well might be a question of degree rather than kind.
I think the point of that is it's all a question of degree, and that if you take that as read, then the interrelatedness, the interconnectedness of living things becomes much more full and miraculous, and that our insistence on chopping it up into kind of categories of sentience it is our own way of just organizing it so that we can kind of teach it, but bears no relationship to what's actually happening.
Walk away with our minds work rather than how the universe.
Quite. We need neat parcels. We need neat parcels, chunks.
It seems to me the wisdom of the indigenous races throughout the world can really teach us a lot about the way the human mind actually develops, and thinking about our own indigenous folk and the way they think. I had a little to do with them. I think I understand them a little. And it is such an arrogance on our part to believe that we can bring them into our way of thinking in short scales of time. It's a very slow process, but it is also miraculous, and it's one of the wonders of the whole creation and of the human mind, that it can be so, that they can be so different from us. But it does need humility on our part to try better to understand where they actually come from.
Well said. Very well said.
Perhaps it strikes me that humanity does understand algorithms, but perhaps that's a symptom of our own perception of our inadequacy in terms of understanding, that we resort to algorithms to devise ways of understanding the world. Perhaps getting back to Carter, there's no need for algorithms, but perhaps there are imaginings and understandings and perceptions beyond our own imagining, beyond algorithms that we can't even begin to define.
Well, we know that the perceptual systems of other animals perceive things that we're blind to. Bees see magnetic fields and ultraviolet, and it's there's more going on than we have a window to. And that's, yeah.
She's actually given us a great gift, hasn't she?
I think it's wonderful, and I also think that the worldwide uptake of the story, which should have just been a local, human interest story, the worldwide uptake of it means that there are echoes of something profound going on with that, and it's not just a slow news day. Those were rhetorical questions. Sorry if I missed that. Anyone else want to chime?